Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our first Pupcorn Movies stream.
Hi.
Welcome, Fado.
You're
Welcome to the
definitely
stream.
my name is Octavius Cimarilius, and I'm just like, my name's
Maximus
Jeff.
Octavius Amarilius. I'm Jeff.
My name's Jeff.
And we just saw, this past Sunday, the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie. Alrighty.
So, this is new for us, so bear with us as we,
We're going to start with no spoilers.
yes,
Yes.
get
Gonna
ourselves
be
together
polite.
here.
And then we'll just gradually go into spoilers, and I'll remove the no from this little post. But we'll talk about our history with the previous movies. For example, Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which was our third date.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of sentimental value, but I am not as positive with this movie in particular, especially looking back, as you are. But I thought it was a fine movie.
I mean, I think that it's fun in general. Like, the franchise is fun. It's not necessarily taking itself too seriously, but it's also not making.
It's all good.
It's not making a mockery of itself either, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because I've seen movies where it's like they know it's not a serious movie, so they have like almost too much fun where it's like it's not fun for the audience anymore.
Well, it's crazy to see how far we've come, because do you remember the very first trailer with Ugly Sonic?
Yeah.
Like the one, so before they even revealed it, they did, I believe,
Yeah,
this silhouette. And even that silhouette, you're like, something's off. Before they actually showed like
Well,
how
they
Sonic
almost
looked like.
tried to make him too human-esque, and it was just weird.
Both too human and too animal, like not a cartoon hedgehog, a actual hedgehog.
Yeah.
And now that thing only lives in the Chip and Dale movie for some reason.
And Our Nightmares.
Yeah, and Our Nightmares. But it got so much backlash.
We need to put a picture of the little girl from the video game itself with the original Sonic. And
that should have been the thumbnail.
just that be the nightmare fuel
oh my God.
that it should be.
Yeah.
I see that little girl, my brain does the sound effect from the guy that the train comes too close and he's like, like,
yeah.
terrifying, man.
But for what it was, we thoroughly enjoyed the first
Yeah.
Sonic movie.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. It was really clever, in my opinion, how they did his catchphrases, because they outdate so quickly that they just already made it outdated, and that was kind of like a character trait from him. Like, he loves pop culture, but he's just a little bit behind.
Agreed.
And I think that was a clever way to incorporate his personality from the game into a movie.
But from that backlash came the design of Sonic that we know now.
Yeah.
Which is this one. And shortly after that trailer was released and well received, those animators were let go. Which was weird, because the animation team, I believe, also worked on that Cats movie that no one wants to talk about, that I didn't see. But between Sonic and Cats, they were just like, all right, you gotta go.
Well, I think society in general has this weird obsession, and it bothers me slightly, and I just scroll past, I'm not going to be a neg nugget online, I just hate that. But, like, cat buttholes and, like, cat, like, animal genitalia, and it just is really a weird fetish that people have, that they just think it's cute, and I'm like, it's a butthole. It is what it is. Like, it's not adorable. It's not like, oh, that, like, there are people that have paintings of cat buttholes.
Oh my God.
That they hang in their house. And it's just really weird. And I think that, like, artists and to an extent the animators took that in stride, and they were like, well, let's make this realistic. And people like buttholes. Let's, like, put those in there. And it's just weird. And it's like, no, please don't do that. And then we get the nightmare fuel that is the first Sonic. They want it to be too realistic, but it's like, no, please don't.
But it's a testament to one of the few times where the studio listened to feedback, and decided to make the change. But it's also, I've heard that it was fan feedback, but I also heard like it was just general audience of them being like, because if it was just the fans of the studio, would have most likely been like, I don't care. But this was like well around, like people were terrified.
Yeah.
They were just like,
He
all
did
right,
not look good.
back to the drawing board. They fixed him. And I thought, well, I have to see it because they actually addressed the problem.
They listened to
and
the feedback.
If anything, I'll enjoy Jim Carrey's performance. But I thoroughly had a good time. I wouldn't say it was a wonderful movie because I haven't watched it since.
Yeah, I think it was fun.
But it was fun.
In my memory, it was fun. They had some heart, where they talked about where Sonic came from and, his family and things like that. And the transition into his new family and the respect the new family has for the old family. I think it was just well done.
Mm-hmm. So
I enjoyed it. Yeah, and I enjoy the franchise thus far.
Yeah, because we're moving on to Sonic 2, which was more what I was hoping from the get-go, but I was like, at least we got there. Because if it would have been the ugly Sonic, it would have been a one-and-done flop.
Oh, yeah.
We wouldn't be where we are now.
It's also like keeping in mind too, there are people that have never played a Sonic game that are going to see those movies, so they have to introduce it and make it cohesive before they can start getting into like actual game stories and lore. Like they have to set that up. Well, so that the people that have never played the games or, whatnot, they know what's going on.
Not only that, but, like, they could have easily made this, like, oh, not an origin story. This is just Jim Carrey's Robotnik, and he'd never look like this. Which is more closer to the character that we know as Dr. Eggman / Robotnik. I did look that up, actually. Eggman was always his name in Japan. Robotnik was an Americanized name.
Oh.
So... go from that.
I've always just called him Eggman.
To this, and now we have Sonic 3, which is where we will get into our review.
Yes.
This is a movie that I've been wanting for video game adaptations for a while, that literally takes a game, has its own creative liberties, but follows the game as a love letter.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stumble through this painfully. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Having just played the game, literally finishing the game the day before we see the movie.
Yeah.
Definitely helped, especially because I have very poor memory retention for small details and things that I'm not having an obsessive fixation with at the time. So, like, Sonic isn't an obsessive fixation for me, so like small details tend to escape me relatively fast. So seeing the movie so soon after playing the game and finishing the game, I noticed and remembered a lot of small details that they put in that I was like, oh, that was really cool. That was really cool that they included that. That was really cool they made that look that way. And I think that it definitely, you can tell the creative team liked the source material.
Yeah.
Or at least they respected the source material.
Jeff Fowler, who I believe is the director. I'm going to look that up right now.
Yeah, this is a nice part about doing the reviews this way. Usually we try to do all this beforehand, and then we start to get nervous that we're stumbling along too long.
Jeff Fowler. He's a Sonic fan.
Yeah, so you get you see that. You can tell. You can tell they like the source material. Because
he's 46 years old. He's not an old curmudgeon that's just like, I know what's best.
He's in our generation.
Yeah.
And it's... I love that. I love that, they make the characters look like the video game characters. Their personalities are the video game characters. The small details, I think one of them was Knuckles being afraid of ghosts.
Yep. They didn't have to include that, but it was
much
great
to their character and to who they are from the games. Those little details, just they move so much within the films that I think it's important that they were there, and I love that they were there, and they were included in a way that was cohesive and understandable, and it didn't feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a storyteller myself, I've definitely been in that spot where I'm like, fuck, I forgot to put that in. How do I include that? And then it's just like this weird random sentence that's like, oh yeah, he's afraid of ghosts. And it's like, well, that came out of the blue. You got to incorporate that a little better. So I like that they did that with the characters themselves, especially introducing a new character into an already character heavy storyline. that they each don't bleed into each other. They have their own personalities, and they're very strong personalities, and I like that.
Yeah, the characters in this were great, and like even the characters that I was like, take it or leave it with the other ones, like the human characters.
Yeah.
I don't care much about Tom and Maddie.
But
I think they're fine. They're charming.
Yeah,
they're fine.
They're fun.
But I felt there was too much of them in the first two movies.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, there's just enough to like keep the
Make
heart
it
of the
make sense.
story, make it make sense.
I feel
but
like
they back off when you want the dynamic between Tails, Knuckles, and
I feel like the human
Sonic.
characters are there to help push the animated characters, the video game characters, in the direction they need to go in. And they also are...
Like, to be fair, your biggest laugh was from Tom and Maddie.
Oh my god. It was so... like, I hate puppets. And I just finished reading a horror book about puppets, actually. And
So,
then
like,
we go and
spoilers.
see... this movie, and there's a puppet, and I lost my shit. I just thought it was so funny that there's a freaking puppet. And
Because
and it
basically...
was just creepy, and everyone, you're supposed to think it's creepy, and Tom's like, it's not creepy, it's not weird. And it just brought me great joy.
Because they had a lot of downtime because all of the kids like were shipped
they were
off,
sent off on a mission.
sent off on a mission, so they had a lot of downtime, and they like crocheted and he did puppetry.
Honestly, okay, so I think that was such a great touch, and I'm sorry, I'm babbling a little bit.
No, you're fine.
But
that's why we're doing it as a stream.
One of the things that
if you're in the chat, you are more than welcome to put your thoughts in as well about any Sonic movies.
Group effort.
Yeah, this is all about a discussion.
One thing that I really loved that they did with Tom and Maddie, they're the only romance.
Yep.
Okay. So, and at that, it's a very light romance. It's not... After they get... Yeah, after...
I could debate another romance. It's one-sided, but I could debate another romance.
Well, I mean, it's Eggman and his henchman.
Agent Stone.
Yeah. You know. But, like... So what... My qualm that I have with a lot of modern storytelling, a lot of modern movies, modern media, there's always a romance. There's always that love story, and it just is repetitive and tiring, and it's always the same.
Okay.
So I really enjoy that in this franchise that it's not heavy on that romance.
Yeah.
And you have these two people, they're newly married.
Yep.
They haven't been married for a decade, you know.
No.
But they show kind of a realistic idea of their marriage, and it's like, I can understand that because we've been married for a couple years and, you know, together for a little bit longer than that. And it's like, the way these stories are told, it was like, oh, this endless love where you never get tired of each other and you're never bored and you're with your best friend and it's great all the time. And you have this story where they're like, oh, the kids are gone. It's going to be so much fun. And you see them and there's just these weird ass crafts, which I relate to on a deep personal level. And they're like, oh, this is great, right? And then the kids come home, they're like, thank God I was so bored. And it's like, yes, you're with your best friend, but you're gonna be bored sometimes, and that's okay. And it can be funny. And that was the introduction to the puppet, which, again, I thought was hilarious. So it's just like, I enjoyed that it's not a romance-heavy
Absolutely.
story, and it is focused on Sonic and the gang, and it is their story to tell, that their human counterparts just kind of push them in the direction.
Yep.
And they're kind of used as a tool to get them where they are that you don't necessarily need in the video game. So, like, in the video games, the characters themselves do everything.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense to do that if you're putting them into a low fantasy real world situation where, you know, real physics do apply. Society is going on. There are other people. There, you know, things are still happening. So they use those human characters to kind of progress the story in a way that is real enough that it's believable.
Yeah.
And that's where I get hung up on a lot of, like, fantasy, science fiction, is like, it's so unbelievable that it's like, yeah, that just, it's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I got you.
You know, whereas this, like, there is risk that they have to take.
They even found a clever way to include the sister and her fiance,
Oh.
to where like it was
cohesive
It was
with the story
cohesive,
they
yeah.
already told without overdoing
it felt
their
more like a
part.
cameo.
Yeah.
Where until we got to the point where I was just like, what the fuck is up with this wedding in the second movie?
Yeah.
And like that finally paid off, but I was like, we're taking a huge chunk away from the plot for this damn wedding.
Yeah.
and then it happens, like they reveal Gunn. I'm like, okay, Gunn is in this, which was a good tip off for me because I'm like, if you're including Gunn, you're not just sticking to the Genesis
Right.
Sonic,
You're gonna
which is
expand.
Sega's safe area.
Yeah.
That is one of my biggest loves of like the Sonic era we're in now. Is I understand that like the Sega games were to many the best, and to me like sure the best, really
I think
good.
It depends on what you're into.
But for the
Yeah.
longest time, it was just like, those are the only ones that matter, forget the rest. And that always bothered me. So I'm glad we're at this point where like we're at least willing to take a look back at the others and see
Yeah.
what worked and what didn't, what bones were good in like the Sonic
Right.
Adventure games and Sonic Shadow the Hedgehog, and dare I say it, like once we get to maybe Sonic at the Secret Wings are Unleashed, I don't think so. But those are other games with like weird elements, but potential.
Yeah. And I think that taking the pieces, almost deconstructing the games and taking, okay, what is salvageable for a greater story and what is only there to make the game work, and being able to tell the difference and utilize those things, but also putting little aspects of only the game features in the movie is really fun. Like, I love that there's some enemies that show up in the movie that are
Yeah.
in the game. Like,
Yep.
you can tell they looked at the game, they looked at the design of these enemies, and they said, all right, let's do that. And it just like, it makes sense. It's like you already have the framework laid out for you. Now you just got to fill in the meat. And
Yeah.
I
I'm
think that they're doing a
sure
great job doing
Eggman's
that.
like big old crab home is from a game. I don't
Yeah.
remember which one in particular. I believe one of the newer ones.
Yeah.
But I've seen that crab
Join me in the
before.
crab.
Yeah, join me in the crab. But we've talked a lot about Sonic and his friends, but why don't we talk about the big kahuna himself for this movie,
Yeah.
Shadow the Hedgehog, played by Keanu Reeves, which is brilliant casting.
Yeah, it really is.
He nailed it.
It it is very much John Wick the Hedgehog.
Yes, John Wick the Hedgehog.
And I couldn't be happier about it. I think that there's gonna be a lot of like teen girls that are gonna have some pretty weird fantasies about Shadow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because like a lot of teen
He's
women
a sexy
love
little hedgehog.
Keanu Reeves,
He just is.
and a lot of teen girls love Shadow the Hedgehog. So
Yeah.
it's just gonna.
He's dangerous. He's damaged.
Where is the Keanu gonna begin, and where does the Hedgehog end?
I don't think they'll know. I don't think they'll care. There's gonna be a lot of really weird fan fiction to start popping up on Wattpad.
But speaking of Shadow, this brings me to my actual favorite human character, and that is Maria Robotnik.
Yes.
Who you were kind of indifferent
I
towards
was
when it came
confused.
to the video game.
I was confused during the video game, and it's not all the video game's fault. Like, when we play, we don't have any sound on, just so that it doesn't bleed through into the microphone. So that means I can't hear what's going on. So I can't always hear the dialogue. I can't always hear, the back information of what's happening. So I thought it was a romance. I thought that Shadow was, like, in love with Maria, and she was like an adult person. And then you explain, no, she's a kid. She's a little kid.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. So they're friends. And then I think the movie did a great job of showing that they're friends to the point where they're being raised together. So they have more of like a sibling bond and a friendship that is unique because they're the only children. They're the only ones that can play in this facility amongst all the adults and the scientists and all of these people that aren't going to play with them. They get to be kids and have fun together.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a bond that, I don't care what anyone says, is such a special and unique relationship.
Yeah.
Like, I think back to my own childhood friends, and it's like, I haven't spoken to in 20 plus years, but if they were to call me out of the blue and be like, hey, what's good? I'm like, we need to get together. What's happening? Like, all of the fun times of being a kid kind of flood back, and it almost doesn't matter what's happening in your real life anymore. You go back to that time, and it is very special. And I like that they included more information, so it's not like a weird romancy like.
Well, one of the changes that they made for the better is no matter what game Maria appears in, she's very much just like the pure soul, the kind soul. That's good for a symbolic character, for like that sense of goodness in Shadow's life. But this was the first time Maria was a kid.
Yeah. She was mischievous.
She was mischievous. She was a little rebellious. She wanted to have fun. She wanted to fool around. Like, she very much was a kid. Like, the moment I knew, oh, they nailed this, was when she goes and puts her hand on the capsule that Shadow is in. I was just like, yeah, just like the games. And then she takes out a Sharpie
and draws a little
and
face.
makes a little face. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, I very much love what they did with her character. I think that adding that little bit of childlike wonder and mischievous attitude makes a character way more likable than just the pure soul that doesn't do anything, because it's like...
Well, now you relate to her more.
Yeah, and
but
you don't
more
really
importantly,
remember the pure
you relate
soul,
to Shadow's pain.
Yeah.
Now you feel his pain and you understand why he's doing what he's doing. Perhaps more so than in the game. So they did make some changes. In the games, Gerald gets kidnapped and he dies shortly after Maria. Yeah. But his records are stored into the canon to where that's hacked into. He's like, all right, I'm bringing forth the bio-lizard. That's the game. In the movies, he gets imprisoned. He has one of Shadow's quills. This is where we get a little into spoilers.
Yeah, so take that no right
Take that no right out of there.
Yeah,
he has one of Shadow's quills, and he frees Shadow. And then he's the one kind of fueling Shadow's revenge. Instead of just a hazy memory in the games.
Which in a weird way, like, it's same but different. Like, because from what I recall in the games, like, it is still Gerald that is kind of pulling all the strings, and everybody falls for it. So he's basically playing everyone until the very end, when they're like, wait a minute, this isn't what we wanted to do, and then everyone has to team up together. Whereas the movie, it's like he's still doing that, but you kind of know from the beginning that he's the one doing it. Whereas in the game, it's not until almost the end when you do have to team up and defeat the laser together, that it's apparent that's what he was trying to do.
And I really liked the portrayal of Gerald Robotnik in this. Even though it was just more Jim Carrey, which I can never say no to. I liked how there was that goofy side, but that also sinister, manipulative side that I think really helped. It reminded me, and I didn't much care for the movie, his portrayal of Count Olaf from A Series of Unfortunate Events. Goofy and over the top, but very much a manipulator, very much the villain. Yeah. And I got that with Gerald.
I struggle with reviewing it just because I'm like, okay, is it because I love Jim Carrey or because I do like the character portrayal?
Exactly. That's why I was so...
I could see somebody that's not a big Jim Carrey fan having more qualms with it than I would, but I can't help it. I genuinely, like, I grew up with Jim Carrey, and, you know, my favorite movies, like my all-time favorites, Jim Carrey is in a lot of them. Yeah. You know, it's like Ace Ventura, like a huge part of my personality is based on those movies. And so it just is difficult to kind of dislike his character. I do like the portrayal that Gerald is. He's so dead set, like he is the manipulator. Yeah. Whereas Eggman is a manipulator, but he still has that humanity that longs for family and longs for meaningful relationships, and he wants that, but he also is a bad guy, so it's like he doesn't know how. Right. You know, he doesn't fully see the idea that, like, his henchman is his family. His henchman loves him and wants to do good by him and wants to help him. But because they're not blood, he doesn't see that throughout the whole movie until the very end. And it, like, you can kind of see how Gerald manipulates that. Yes. And it's like you can see the difference between a fun hokey villain and like a real
Yep. Threat.
bad guy. And I love that they're played by the same person, because I think that has a lot of different layers to a performance to show like who's the real bad guy and who's a bad guy that could easily become not a bad guy if given the opportunity in the situation. And I think that it was just a brilliant performance. And I mean,
I like how one of the funniest scenes, like the montage of them catching up, was also giving subtle hints of like how he was manipulating the whole situation. It was like giving you two things. It was giving you such big laughs because you have Jim Carrey dressed as Santa.
Look so stupid. Like, you know, they look goofy, so it's hard not to chuckle at them. But
also he's feeding into what he knows his grandson wants to ultimately get what he wants.
Yeah. He is being the manipulator.
Yep.
And I really love even just the expressions, because when we first get back to Eggman and you find out that he's alive, you can see that he's just in this depressive state. And
he's watching Spanish soap operas.
Oh my god, I love it. I would love to possibly do a video. So anyone watching, if you want to see a video like this, let me know in the comments and I'll get working on it. But the portrayal of like modern media films specifically that portray depression in an accurate way. And it's like a lot of people think depression is like I can't get out of bed or and it is, but it's also what you see Thor doing.
I was just about thinking of Thor and Endgame.
You see them and the first thing they go is they stop taking care of themselves, but they overindulge in the things they like. Spanish soap operas, you see all the takeout containers everywhere, all of like, you know, food that they enjoy that bring them dopamine and to like make them feel good is just everywhere. No one likes cleaning. Who's gonna clean? And you see comfort items like the crocheted Afghan on his villain chair, like those comfort items that show up everywhere that bring you that serotonin boost that you need when you are depressed. And I love seeing an accurate portrayal as someone who has like clinically diagnosed depression. And I've done that where I'm just like, I'm feeling really depressed, I miss my mom, so I grabbed the Afghan she made me and I'm just gonna curl up with this and eat noodles because I'm sad. And it's like, to see that represented in film and then to see them come out of that and like the progression out of that and the healing that takes place, I think is really cathartic. And I'd love to do a video kind of on characters that we see go through that process and just, you know, analyze it a little bit. But I love that even when he gets his suit remade, so Sonic and the gang comes in, he's like, oh, we're back in the game. He has pieces of the Afghan in his suit because his suit doesn't fit because he gained a bunch of weight. So his suit doesn't fit. He rips the shirt off his henchman. And there's also pieces of the Afghan sewed in to his jacket. And it just is like, to me, I'm like, those little touches are phenomenal. And then you see, as he's getting closer to his grandfather, to Gerald, you see those little comfort things going away. So you see him getting a new suit. You see him, you know, taking care of himself. You see his facilities are cleaned up. And that's what a healing process looks like. And you see Gerald recognizing that and honing into that just so that he can, like, rip the heart out at the end. And I think that is excellently directed and acted. And I think that's what makes the character special, even with all the goofy little things that he does, like, you know, the line, it's like we're the same actor playing two characters in a movie and then they both look at the camera, like, you know, it's those little things I usually don't like, but it works because it's Jim Carrey.
The humor had more hits than misses this time around. Whereas I remember the first movie, the only time I legit had a good laugh was during that chase scene in the first movie when he destroys the robot, it's a smaller robot, then he destroys it, and he's just like, what the? And then Jim Carrey's like, ever wonder where your tax dollars are going? I thought that was hilarious. The second movie had a couple more funny bits. I think one of my favorites is like when they toss the emerald and Robotnik comes in, yeah, and he grabs it. Later, haters. This one had quite a few. This one had quite a few good chuckles.
Well, I think too because it was also, correct me if I'm wrong, whenever they cast him as Eggman, a lot of people were skeptical because Eggman looks a certain way and
Right.
Jim Carrey doesn't look that way.
Yep. That's why.
So there was a lot of skepticism, and also because
back to this
of
one.
his type of humor that he does, a lot of people were leery, like, can he play that type of role? Or
Yeah.
will it become just another Jim Carrey role?
Yeah, because the
And
thing
it
about
did, but it
the Eggman
works.
character is he can be silly, but he can dial it back and be very threatening.
Yeah. That's my favorite type of villain, where they're like, they can kind of be goofy, but then like at the turn of a hat, you're like, oh shit, they could kill me.
Mhm.
And it's like, they would, and they can because they're psychotic.
Yep.
So I know there was a lot of skepticism with him playing that
I love
role,
that role.
and I think they're slowly, like, with each film, kind of letting Jim do more.
Yeah, I think
of
this
what
was the
he wants
most
to do. They're like,
Jim
they're
off the
letting
leash.
him
It
be
was.
Jim Carrey.
Yep.
And it is working because I understand more now after playing Sonic Adventure 2.
Mm-hmm.
Eggman is a goofy character.
Yes.
Like, I've only ever played the safe Sega side scroller.
Yep.
You know, where
Where he's a boss.
He's just the boss at
Yep.
the end of the level that you beat and you move on. He doesn't really have a storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And if he did, I didn't remember.
Mm-hmm.
He's a goofy villain. Like,
Yeah.
even his, like, when he's in his little mech suit and he's jumping up and down, but he's still on fire, like, you know,
Mhm.
he's a goofy guy. So I think that it is absolutely the right call to let Jim Carrey be a little weird, be a little goofy,
Yup.
do those, the weird moves that he does. And I think it fits that villain, that character. I really enjoyed him in that role. And
No. It's crazy how this has not only become one of my favorite Jim Carrey roles altogether, like right up there with like The Grinch, but how starting out I just said, well, if for anything, I'll like these movies for Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And
it
now
turned
we're
out
at a
to be
point
good,
where it's
yeah.
like, no, I genuinely love this movie. Jim Carrey included, but I genuinely love this movie.
Yeah.
I think this is a very good movie. And dare I say, the Mario fanatic in me is like tussling with it, but I am speaking, I think this is the best video game movie that's been around yet, with like the most concrete story, the most faithful to the material,
Yeah.
and just gets what video games can do for the silver screen.
Yeah. My brain went straight to The Witcher because I love The Witcher, but look what
I
they're
liked
doing.
season 1.
They've moved so far away from the source material.
I liked season
and-
1. Looking back, there's a couple things that we even said in the season
And then
2 review that I'm just like,
yeah.
oh, you
Well, I also
poor misguided
don't
children.
think it would count because it was a book first. So it was a video game based off of a book, and
Okay.
now they're making a TV show based off the video game based off the book. So
Okay.
it's like, okay, there's, you know, it's a little more complex and
Witcher,
complicated.
oh, how the mighty hath fallen.
But I absolutely think that this was a great representation of how you can take a video game and make it a film and make it make sense and love and respect the source material.
There was interesting conflict. Like, Sonic would not be a team player.
Yeah. and that's something we talk about a lot, maybe not necessarily on, you know, the channel. I know we've mentioned it
I'm
on
sure
the
we've
channel.
blurped it during like streams
Yeah,
or
but we talk
commentary.
about a lot just when we conversate.
Yeah.
Having imperfect main characters and imperfect heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic is very flawed. After
Yes.
all, he is still a child, and he is still learning to navigate
There
himself
definitely,
and his
I did
role in the
notice
world.
that this interpretation of Sonic is a lot younger than the games, to where he's kind of like a teenager,
teenager.
16, 17.
Teenagers.
Yeah. Whereas this one, I'd say he's like 12, 13.
Like, he does... I don't think they say specifically how old he is, but
Okay.
he is very childlike.
Yes.
So he very much could be a
Preteen.
15-year-old, you know, hedgehog.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, think of the 15-year-old boys that exist in today's world. They're very childlike because they are still children.
Okay. Yeah.
But even just like his little quips and things like that. But just like you said, he's refusing to be a team player. He doesn't know how to be a team player. He wants to do it his way or the highway. And it's like...
He's impatient, which was always his character.
Yeah. And even little things that they added about that, like in the beginning of the movie, they do a race.
Yep.
And he loses to Knuckles and Tails, and they're waiting at the finish line tapping their foot. And I remember that from the game, like when they're waiting and he just taps his foot.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, hurry up, because he goes fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they included just little details like that shows they know these characters inside and out. They know their personalities.
They know these characters. They know these games. Before we start getting into like the big spoilers and also our comments on like how the movie ended, because that was my biggest laugh.
Yeah.
Was when the movie was about to end. I want to talk about some Easter eggs for like the Sonic fans here. So they do incorporate the Bio-Lizard.
They do.
I was wondering, I'm like, how are they going to use are they even going to address the Bio-Lizard? And they do it in the most clever way, I think, still faithful to the story, without having like a big boss fight at the end of the movie. Right. So while Maria and Shadow are bonding over a montage to some early 2000s song, I can imagine, they're watching these horror movies and old like kaiju movies, and the kaiju puppet is clearly the Bio-Lizard. And it's like when space attacks or something like that. And it's cool because later on when they're sitting under the stars with that heartwarming moment, he's just like, they talk to me like I'm that monster on TV, which is funny because in the games, that's the prototype to what Shadow would become.
I caught it quickly, again, because we had just played the game, but you lost your shit. And that we were in the theater.
I was giggling
with a
and
bunch
I was just
of
like,
children that probably didn't understand, and
I was the one nerd,
like a little kid. It was wonderful.
Another one I liked was before they descend down into the city to investigate Shadow. He does the line from Sonic Adventure 2 where it's just like, talk about low budget flights, no food or movies. I'm out of here. Yeah, they do that line.
And again, it just goes to show what magic you can make when you appreciate and respect the source material.
But I think a really good parallel that makes these characters work is the heart of the story, which we're going to go into the ending, but talk about the beginning a little, because one of the more slower scenes where it's just like, where is this going, is this very heartfelt scene between Tom and Sonic. Yeah. About like, hey, you don't let your anger control you. You keep it inside and you control it and stuff like that. Yeah. And it's this nice highlight that like the game's touched on, but this one really highlighted of Sonic has a support team, a support system. Shadow does not. Right. He lost his, and what he does have is manipulating him. Yeah. This is the whole...
I even think without the manipulation, like, that's a very real psychological effect if you come from a place of trauma, losing your whole family, and you don't have or find a new support system that treats you tenderly and loves you and cares about you and helps you through that.
Those that don't understand Shadow, his nickname is Shadow the Hedgehog. And I'm just like, yeah, he's the edgy. And it doesn't help that one of his games, he has a gun
and trauma
and a motorcycle. But when you dive into the character, like, he doesn't have a support system.
So it's like,
what the man needs therapy. He needs cinema therapy.
What do you think is gonna happen? Like when this hedgehog. What do you think is gonna happen with this angry hedgehog? But whenever you have essentially a child, because he was still a child, that loses his family, loses his support system, and then has no one to care for him, no one to care about him,
and he's stuck in a government facility for 50 years.
It's gonna create so much anger and resentment and hatred, and of course, like, that's what happens. And to bring it back to what you were saying, the slow moment with Tom and Sonic, when he says, talks about his heart, Sonic relays that same message to Shadow
at the end of the movie. That was the first time I saw you cry during a video game adaptation.
Yeah, I cried. It was sad.
That's the big difference with this one. This movie has heart. The first two,
Well, it's
maybe.
related.
It has as much heart as like
yeah.
the Alvin and the Chipmunk movies.
Well, it's
They're
the
cute,
message,
but
the message
this
to
movie
me
has heart.
is relatable because I think about like not necessarily the same background. I was never kept, you know, in a government facility as a project, but
I would hope not.
like, you know, losing my family,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then being so angry and so resentful that I don't have family anymore because of, you know, tragedy, that there is a lot of anger and resentment there. But then I think about like you and your dad and all the nice things that I get to have because of you and your family, and it just made me tear up a little bit. And it's just like, I want the same thing for Shadow. Come on, Shadow.
Yeah.
There's hope for us. Like, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I teared up
So
a little bit
that was
now.
a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And then we had my beautiful moment, which was Live and Learn, which, to be fair, that motif was all throughout that movie. It was basically the Shadow theme. Like right after the opening credits, Maria's playing it on her acoustic guitar, just bam, 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 and I'm just like, oh, we're set. We got this. I have faith.
Yeah.
But the pure version of like Live and Learn, well, no, I think it's still a remix, but the song comes in when they turn Supersonic and Super Shadow for the finale, and I was just like, oh God, we're there. You can ship me out to space.
Spock style.
I am content, Spock style. And yeah, that was when I knew that, like, yup, this movie is absolutely a love letter and very faithful to Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah.
But that also brought me to my favorite laugh, which was Robotnik having that change of heart and Eggman trying to steer the laser away from Earth.
Oh my God, it was so because he does it. They get the laser moved away, and he's like, "I did it." And then I forget what happens, but like
they move it too far.
It
shifts a little too far
because the moon.
Yeah, it hits the moon.
And so they move the laser away, and he goes, oh, "I did it." And then you have Knuckles and Tails looking like, what the fuck, man? We just helped you. And then it hits the moon, and he goes, look what you did.
Look what you did. Because immediately when it hits, they're all like, ooh. And then he goes, look what you did.
Yeah. After he just took credit for doing it
laughed
himself.
so hard.
Which is so Jim Carrey. I
Yep.
love it.
This was just a great movie. If you're a fan at all of the previous two movies, you're going to love this movie.
Especially
even
if
you're like,
the game.
with the previous two movies,
Yeah.
I'd say still give this one a shot.
Especially if you've played the game and you like the games, because I have come to realize that it was actually quite a popular game.
Mm-hmm.
That even when we were doing the playthrough, a lot of people being like, wow, this was my childhood.
Yep.
I think that this movie really does do an excellent job at capturing the essence of the video game, including some of the battle arenas are pretty close in the movie. Like,
there are a couple shots where I was just like, oh damn,
like, wow, they took
just
that
like the game.
right from the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, there are some goofy things that they do with Gerald and Eggman together. That I'm like, okay, that's fan service. That's for us Jim Carrey fans. You know, the dance scene with the lasers. You know, it's just a fun little expedition.
They found a way to incorporate the Chow Garden, and it worked.
Oh my God,
it was like
so
a
cute.
Japanese Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, it was like a little cafe that they went to, and they're dressed up like the Chows, and it was just such an enjoyable moment. I also really love that they incorporated the idea of the gravity that you go through during the space levels.
Fuck that level.
All of these like gravity pulls where you have to change.
Fuck that part of the level.
Change the directions of gravity and, you know, move throughout space in only one direction until you can change it again.
Mm-hmm.
They incorporated that into the movie, which I'm like, that's so clever. You have this facility that no one knows anything about it, and then they change gravity like the game. I'm like, you know, that was a really clever way to also incorporate that part of, you know, the game into the movie in a way that makes sense. That's not, you know, they're in space trying to change gravity. You know, it was cleverly incorporated, and I really liked it.
Nice.
I like the message that, you know, gets Shadow on board with everything, that, you know, even though the star is gone, the light remains. And
Yeah.
for him, that was kind of like his quote unquote come to Jesus moment of like, this isn't what Maria would have wanted.
Yeah.
This isn't what she would have been okay with. And it was his realization that even though she's gone, her love still lives through him, and he's not living life the way that she would have been okay with. And for him, that is enough to become part of the good guys.
Yep. So what would you rate this before we start getting into after the credits and talking about future movies?
I shadow watching the novellas. Yes. I absolutely love it. I would definitely say it.
Is it sleep at the foot of the bed or is it part of the family? I'm juggling between those two.
I feel like right now, having watched
the first
it
movie
so
was worth a
freshly
watch,
and talked about all of the things that we love about it, I would say it's part of the family.
Yeah.
Like, this
what
is
were
definitely
what were some
on
complaints
DVD.
you had, or any like nitpicks or anything?
So, we talked about it as soon as we got home. The one thing that I kind of hyper focused on and was just like almost grossed out by was the texture of their eyeballs.
Oh, okay.
It was just like too human. Like, you could see like the little veins and the texture of like liquid on the surface of their eyeballs, and it creeps me out because they themselves don't look real.
Yeah.
So the fact that they made their eyeballs look so real, is very impressive. Kudos to the animators for being able to do that. But it was really gross to me, and I kind of fixated on it for a little bit. Really has nothing to do with the movie other than I was just like, ew. It was like when you see those plushy stuffed animals with like real human teeth. You're just like, ugh. That's kind of what that was like for me.
I can't think of a complaint off the top of my head. I think with time, maybe a couple nitpicks will happen with a rewatch. But this is also like, it's a one-to-one, almost perfect video game adaptation that I thought I'd never seen. And I was just like, wow, that's really impressive. Like, there were good performances, the writing was clever, the jokes were on point.
Think any nitpicks that I would have would depend on how they do the next one.
Yeah, I am worried that I think we peaked here.
If they don't wrap up some bows or explain some things with the next one, I feel like I'd have questions as to how it ended.
Okay.
So, like, I want to know what happens to Eggman and his henchmen. Like, where do their stories go? Because for this, we're assuming Eggman is dead.
Again.
Like, we're assuming he's dead again. And then at the end, his henchman is just like, okay, and then like walks away into the distance.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what happens to them? Like,
right.
He's still an evil villain's henchman. Like, you don't just put that on your resume and go sign up for Starbucks, you know?
Exactly.
So it's like, what happens to them?
Well, these movies are doing a first where like Eggman dies. In the game, it's always very much, looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again!
Yeah.
Or they team up at the end.
Right.
Which is what we just saw with the video game.
And it's like,
where he's just like, I always looked up to my grandfather, but he was a little sadistic. Tails is like, well, we all did it together.
Yeah. You know? Like, so what happens
Tails is a freaking idiot in the video games.
I love
In the one
Tails.
game, at the very end, after the monster like destroys the city and you just stop the monster and peace is restored, he goes, well, looks like all's well that ends well, right? And I just want to like turn his head and be like, you see that? You see all
Tails is a
the
beautiful
desolation.
child. He is a little child baby.
Damn it, Tails.
But I would say that would be like my biggest.
I am curious where we're going with this.
Qualm, because now to get into big spoilers for if you sat through all of the credits and waited until the very end. They introduce what we're assuming is going to be the new villain.
Yeah.
Metal Sonic.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, are they going to have Metal Sonic and just ignore Eggman? Like, is he dead? Or, like, are they going to explain, like, well, now that Eggman's done and peace is restored, like, here's Sonic. Like,
There was a
You know,
story.
what-
I don't know if it was a comic or like one of the, because like there's also the Archie comic series that
Yeah.
I've never read, but I've heard like there's either a story where Eggman goes missing and one of the Metal Sonics activate on its own as like an emergency,
Okay.
and then it goes on a hunt and it wants the Chaos Emeralds for
Okay.
itself.
So it's like, it's one of those. So
they could adapt
my
that.
qualms with this movie will heavily depend on the next movie.
Okay.
So, because I'm a fan of cliffhangers, when they're done right. Like,
Mhm.
I don't like big ones that are overwhelming cliffhangers. But for this type of film and for the way that they did it, it can be satisfying if it's just like, okay, he's dead, henchman moves on with his life. As long as it's like a second of mention to wrap up the little bow and just push that away. But I also think that each of these movies is relatively independent.
To an extent, yes.
You know, it's like, if you have any little tidbit of background knowledge at all about the game, even if you don't have a whole lot, like, you could easily watch this movie and get together.
Well, you could definitely start with the second movie.
Understand. You know, you don't have to see them all in order, you know, one after another to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
You
this
would just
ain't Harry Potter.
Yeah, you would just have to know, like, okay, Sonic is from a different dimension. That's about it. That's
Yeah.
about all you need to know,
Yeah.
because the relationship is so obvious between him and Tom and him and his family. And it's explained even in that little moment when he like, hey, what's this? Oh, that's a drawing I did the first night that I was here. And you can see like him holding hands with his other family where, you know, and that little moment is enough that anybody that can, you know, comprehend ideas and philosophies can gather that, oh, this is what happened. Something happened. He was removed from his family. He was sad about it. Found his new family.
Yeah. You know what?
Like,
I could extend that, not so much as a complaint, but like if you're not a fan of like Sonic, or like you're just not a fan of like video game movies, I don't think this is going to do much to change your opinion.
Yeah.
Because outside of being a fan, it's a very simple story.
Yeah,
it's a very
it is.
simple setup.
It's not.
I know one of the complaints is people being like, well, it's a very predictable story. I'm like, it should be. It's a one-to-one adaptation of one from 2001.
Well, not only that, I hate that complaint.
It was told first in 2001.
Yeah. I hate that complaint for these types of movies where they want this deep, complex plot, and it's like, it doesn't.
They did that with Mario,
that.
too.
It does not need to have a deep, complex plot. It just needs to be fun to watch. Like, I don't think that there needs to
make sense.
be. Well, yeah, but I don't think that there needs to be because that was one of the biggest complaints of the Mario movies, was like, oh, well, it didn't have a plot. I'm like, no, it did have a plot. It just didn't have a bunch of twists and turns, and this character and that character aren't what they think they are. Like, it is a children's movie. Kids cannot comprehend that type of stuff yet. Just because you're a fan as an adult and watching it as an adult does not mean it was made for you. It was made for children.
All right.
You can enjoy it. Don't expect a deep plot.
Right.
With a bunch of twists and turns and layers and levels. Like, it doesn't have that. It doesn't need that. You know, if you want something like that, go freaking watch a Leonardo DiCaprio movie. Like,
well, no,
you know,
I wouldn't even. I feel that's a little dismissive, because we got like Hayao Miyazaki's movies that are animated and for kids, but also for adults. And we have like
in all fairness, though, those are made for not American children.
All right.
So it's like, I make the argument that culture plays a huge role in that. Like,
all right.
Japanese children and Asian children in general tend to be more mature than American children. We see that in the way their school system works and the way that their job systems work. Like, it just is a cultural difference. So,
but I also think of like Prince of Egypt and others come to mind, but like movies that
here's the
aren't
thing, though.
just
like,
for kids.
And that's fine.
The Iron Giant.
That's fine and dandy, but this isn't like that movie. This
Right.
is
Absolutely.
designed for kids.
Yeah.
So it's like, the idea that it's a children's movie, it is designed for kids, for children, that it doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be philosophical.
Right.
I can spend 3.5 hours going into deep philosophical discussions about the movie of what I interpret and bring it
Right.
out that it is a deep plot and here's why.
Yeah.
And call other people stupid because they don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what was intended.
Right.
So it's the same, like, The Prince of Egypt, you can argue is a children's story, but it's also a biblical story.
Mm-hmm.
So it is technically for kids. Why? Because it's animated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that doesn't mean it's just for kids. I think that we're getting a little off topic, but I think that it's deep in its own way, but it
Okay.
doesn't have a complex plot
Okay.
that is going to suck in the type of viewer that wants a deep, complex plot. And I don't think it needs that. And I really hope for the next one they don't do that, because
Right.
I feel if you try, that's where, in my opinion, it starts getting into taking itself too seriously.
Okay.
It doesn't need to take itself too seriously, but it doesn't need to make a mockery of itself either.
Yeah.
And I think if they tried to do that deep, complex plot, it would do both. It would make a mockery of it because you have fucking a hedgehog and a echidna and a two-tailed fox
Mm-hmm.
doing this deep, complex, philosophical plot,
Mhm.
and it's going to be goofy.
Okay.
It's not going to... I don't think that it would work.
Well, that does happen sometimes. Like, sometimes I think trying to be a little too deep comes off as pretentious.
Yeah.
Snyder.
So and again, that's just my opinion. You know, it's just my opinion. I don't think that it needs to be anything other than the adaptation that they're running with. And I think if they keep running with the source material and they keep loving and respecting the source material, the movies are going to be good.
Yeah.
Because it's going to target the audience that it needs to.
Well,
You know?
I have one more question I'd like to pose before we wrap this up. And we're also going to leave this open to the audience and anyone watching about your thoughts, what you thought of the movie, what some things you didn't like, and what are your thoughts about the Sonic franchise in general. But not only was there Metal Sonic introduced at that stinger at the end, we have Amy Rose joining the Mario movies, the Sonic movies.
Ugh.
Did you know Amy's in
Ugh.
the Mario movies?
I think she's called Princess Peach in the Mario world. I'm intrigued because I didn't much like her in the game. I thought that she was kind of annoying. She didn't really contribute anything. It was just, oh, they left me behind. Like over
She
and
freed
over
Sonic.
and over and over and over again was just, oh, they left me behind. Like and those types of characters tend to just annoy me.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm like, you're not contributing anything. You're just a hindrance to the team, which is a type of character in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
But she just wasn't my favorite. But seeing her in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
you know, she takes down the Metal Sonics, and I'm just like, oh, she did something.
Yep.
Interesting. So I am intrigued. I'm intrigued as to what they do with her.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
curious what the
nervous because
relationship's going to be.
I don't want it to be a romance. But I
Yeah.
also don't have knowledge of a lot of the games if it ever was a romance or like that awkward high tension, you know, situation with anyone. But I don't want it to turn into girl power either. And I mean that delicately because I have no issues with like girl power where girl power should be. I mean, I love Sailor Moon, so
Right.
girl power all the way.
Powerpuff Girls.
But I don't want it to become the Amy show.
That's
Kind of
my
like
worry.
What they did with Mario 2, it was more about Peach than Mario. I
Yeah.
thought. And that was one of the issues that I had. It was done well. It was great.
Well, that's
but
one of
it
my
wasn't
notes
Mario
for
anymore.
the
It was more
Mario.
about Peach.
The next Mario movie is you need more Luigi, less Peach. Even if
Yeah.
it's a pinch less Peach,
And I feel
you
like
need more Luigi.
there's so much anymore in media where you have that strong female character that kind of they need to overshadow all the boys because that's what's trendy right now because they want to show like, see, listen, we support women, we support strong women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you can do that without overshadowing without taking over all of the other characters in the movie. So it is a Sonic movie after all, so I hope it stays a Sonic movie and not, hey, this is the Amy film featuring Sonic. Like,
Yeah.
So I really hope that they're able to do that balance well of
Yeah,
having
definitely.
Amy be a character that holds her own and contributes but doesn't overshadow just for the sake of having a strong female character.
Yeah. Because that was... So Nerd Brain went off for a second, and I was just like, just let it happen and see where this goes. You're not supposed to be able to one-shot a Metal Sonic, let alone an army of Metal Sonics.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, okay, you just diminished a very potential threat. That's why I'm hoping, they're going to bring in Neo Metal Sonic or a different kind of Metal Sonic who's controlling all the other ones.
Yeah.
Because in all cases, you can't one-shot a Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic is so powerful, he even turned on Eggman. That's the whole appeal of Metal Sonic.
Okay.
He believes he's Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay.
And he wants to use the Chaos Emeralds to fulfill that belief.
Gotcha.
So to have a character,
so I think...
unfortunately a female, take down an army of them, I was just like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I know who that is.
So it worries me.
And I'm just a little worried.
Yeah, it worries me that they're going to overdo it. They're going to overcompensate to make Amy like this hard ass that is just, indomitable.
And she can be
and
tough,
just like...
but you can't diminish the threat that is Metal Sonic, our villain.
And it just, so it's going to be
assuming Metal Sonic is our villain, and that wasn't just a throwaway to set up Amy.
Yeah, which it very well could have been.
Yeah, very well could have been.
So I just hope that they don't do her dirty and take away, from her character, her established character, which is, oh no, they left me behind.
Yeah.
And make her this like...
But also don't go in the Peach direction, or worse yet, go beyond the Peach direction.
Yeah.
Like, Peach is the limit where I want my girl boss. Because she still had some, like...
femininity and delicacy.
And like, consideration of her fellow characters.
Because we talk about that a lot with what they're doing with Disney, unfortunately, is they're kind of overcompensating, and it's making it feel like as a woman, it makes it feel like you can't want femininity anymore. You can't want to be the stay-at-home wife or the mommy anymore. You have to be girl boss. You have to be tough. You have to be uncrackable. And it's just like, that's not fair.
Right.
That's not fair to take away characters that want to be soft, that want to be delicate. It's not fair to just get rid of them or to only have one or the other.
That's the thing.
So I
it's
really
that
hope...
one or the other that's the problem. It's not the existence of Girl Boss. It's the existence of Girl Boss that erases every other female character.
And also makes it
and also
as though
gatekeeps any other potential female characters we could have.
That's the issue I have, because I love strong female characters.
Yeah, girl bosses are fine.
I love a good girl boss, but I really hope that for Amy they balance it out.
Yep.
That she can be tough, she can be strong, she can, crack heads and hold her own. But I really hope that they kind of keep, and again, this comes from me not initially liking Amy. I hope they kind of keep her a little bit soft and a little bit ditzy, because that's what makes a well-rounded character, and that's what makes a character likable, is when they have more than one trait, So I really hope that they round Amy out a little bit with a nice mix of girl boss and girly.
I agree.
So
I am curious if they're going to incorporate chaos, because they kind of hinted at what could be chaos when Knuckles was just like, hey, you don't mess with the Master Emerald unless it's needed. Because the whole thing about chaos is when you abuse power, that's what awakens chaos.
Yeah.
When you like threaten the natural balance, chaos gets involved. So they very well could do chaos, but I feel like chaos is the perfect like Thanos bookend to this whole Sonic.
And what we were talking about is
franchise.
Like, would they do that because it's making money? And when something is good and it's making money, they're not going to want to stop making
Although
money.
I'm of the belief you should end on a high note.
Yeah.
And not keep going until Star Wars.
People hate it. and they're just going to slowly take it out back and shoot it while no one's watching.
Star Wars.
Yeah. So we're hoping hard. But yeah, I would say I was excited that it was Amy, but I'm also kind of nervous because of what we all just talked about.
Yep.
I'm also interested as to why they left Rouge out and if we're ever going to see Rouge.
Yeah.
I know you had mentioned
she was the one character who was not in who was from the game that this one did not.
And I don't think she was needed. Like, I don't think that it was like, oh,
Nah.
they missed something out because Rouge wasn't in there. If anything, I think that was the character to cut. Like, that was the character that you really didn't
I feel
need.
like because Rouge was like a double agent, that was the woman of the leader of Gun.
Yeah.
Not the leader of Gun.
She was the sergeant.
The sergeant from Gun, yeah.
She kind of
She was
took
also
that role,
trying to take over for the after the colonel passed.
which I think is...
I feel like she was
Yeah.
the Rouge stand-in.
And I think that was perfectly fine. I'm just curious as to, like, are we going to see Rouge? And because I know when we first started, you talked about her being kind of a controversial character. Because I mean, they did not hold back with her figure.
No.
You know, she was, I'm sure, in a lot of small boys' dreams growing up.
That's the tame design from Sonic Adventure 2. It was the following design that made a lot of people like,
I have questions.
Oh, wait.
I'm sure
What
a
am I
lot of
doing
little
here?
girls came out of the closet and a lot of little boys maybe came into the closet. See, I don't think it's all that bad.
Because, like, that's what
Like,
it was.
she is very clearly a robust little bat,
Mhm.
you know?
This was the one that got a lot of, like, either that or I'll bet she's in Shadow the Hedgehog. Yeah, even that one.
Like, she looks like a good counterpart to Shadow, where she's kind of like the bad girl. And that's,
the goth girl.
you know, I wouldn't even say goth. Like, she's the bad girl.
Okay.
And it's like, usually when they depict, like, bad girl, it's more revealing clothing because that's what we associate with bad behavior.
What if we see this guy?
Oh my god. He looks like a little thug.
Vector the Crocodile. Voiced by Kevin Hart.
Oh my god. That'd be perfect. Are you listening, Sonic Execs? We want to see it.
Yeah. Let's get Vector the Crocodile by Kevin Hart.
But yeah, I think leaving Rouge out was a good decision for the overall film together. But do I have confidence that they could include her? And
People want this guy. I don't know why. He was in one game. He was a hedgehog from the future. He wasn't horrible, but I'm just like, the game didn't do well.
I just don't recall ever.
He's only in one game,
Yeah.
and then he was kind of like swept
Seen
under.
him.
He has his fans, but that's Silver the Hedgehog.
Okay, I've heard Silver the Hedgehog.
Okay. People are just like, oh, are we going to get Silver? I'm like, I don't see Silver ever showing up.
I just think that while there's a lot of characters, I don't think we need to see all of them. And
He exists now in the
unfortunately-
Olympic Games.
Unfortunately, what that means are the niche fans of, like, Silver the Hedgehog, Rouge the Bat,
Yeah.
that, like, they're going to be disappointed that their character wasn't in there. What I would absolutely adore...
You might see them as a little Easter egg like the Bio-Lizard, though.
What I would adore seeing is what Pixar used to do,
Okay.
and to have them do outtakes. So if they
Yeah.
did, like fake bloopers,
Mhm.
and they can include these characters in the fake bloopers, whether it's, like, auditions. Like, how funny would it be to see, like, Silver the Hedgehog auditioning to play Sonic in the movies?
Mhm.
You know, to do stuff like that would be, I feel like, the perfect way to include the characters that weren't really all that popular in the game franchise, but have their fans. I think that it could be a lot of fun to
That's
see
chaos.
them be in, like, the fake outtakes.
Yeah, I could
that
definitely
Pixar
see that.
used to do. I think that could be really cool.
So yeah, that's Chaos, and he changes his form with each Chaos Emerald he absorbs.
Oh,
So once he gets all 7, he becomes like a kaiju.
okay.
So yeah, I could definitely see that happening. Black Doom, because like that,
That's cool. Yeah.
and that looks similar to the meteor that Shadow is in. So I thought
Okay.
that was like a little Easter egg to like Black Doom. So I could definitely see that. Still plenty of possibilities with these movies.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that they can do, and I just really hope that they hold true to the heart of the games and of these characters, because they're 3 for 3 in my book right now with like,
they just keep getting better,
with holding true to
which
who
doesn't
these
happen with
characters
trilogies
are.
often.
So I just hope that they keep up with that. I do have to say though that Knuckles, the movie Knuckles, is my favorite character so far.
I wonder if you'd like the Knuckles TV show.
I don't know. Because I love that he, like, he's kind of a brickhead.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that.
Well, that's because Idris Elba is fantastic.
Yeah. Again, it's the same.
He's the best character in the Disney live-action remakes.
Yeah, it's the same situation with Jim Carrey. I just love Idris Elba.
Idris Elba's fantastic.
I love his portrayal of Knuckles. Like the little intake, like the flash that they had for when he's afraid of ghosts, like holding onto their hands. I was chuckling pretty hard.
All right. So what did everyone think of the Sonic movie? Let us know. And if you liked this setup, we'll do more Pupcorn movie lounges in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. And as always, see you next time. I'm going to close us out with some music.
Alrighty. Toodles.
As always, thanks for watching.